Hi, Vanessa here, your health coach, reporting live from the amazing St. Pete Beach, and I'm here to talk about one of the most important life lessons you may ever learn from me. But first, I want you to imagine this. Close your eyes and imagine what it would feel like to go to bed tonight and to wake up in the morning completely paralyzed from the hips down. You get out of bed to use the restroom like you do any other morning of the week, and your brain is telling your legs to walk, but the signal isn't getting there. You hit the floor and you realize at that point in time that your legs are completely useless to you. You're paralyzed. Can you imagine the terror and the confusion and the disbelief that would be going through your head? If so, that is exactly what happened to me one Monday morning back in January of 2006. Here's how the story goes. About 10 years ago, I had the flu, a bad case of the flu. I was sick for Christmas and I was sick for New Year's. And finally, my fever broke and Dad came over to take down the Christmas tree for me because I was too weak from being sick for so long. But my fever broke that day. And so Dad was headed over to a sports bar to watch the Saints game because they were playing out of town. And it had become kind of our little tradition to go and watch the Saints game together. So since my fever broke and I was feeling a little bit better, I went ahead and went to see the game with my dad. I walked in the sports bar pretty easy, no big deal. I mean, I was weak because I've been sick for so long, but by halftime, I could barely make it to the bathroom. In fact, I didn't make it to the bathroom. I held onto one of the pool tables and then kind of inched my way with my arms back to the table where Dad and I were sitting, and I told him, I said, I can't even make it to the bathroom. My legs are so weak. So he told me to sit down and prop my legs up and get something to eat and rehydrate, and surely I'd be fine once the game ended. By the time the football game was over, I couldn't even walk out of the bar. Dad threw my arm around his neck and pretty much carried the majority of my weight out of the bar to the car. But we just assumed that I'm probably anemic and malnourished and dehydrated from having the flu for as long as I had the flu. So I said, you know, I'll go to bed, I'll get some good sleep, and surely by tomorrow morning, I'll wake up and I'll be perfectly fine again. Fast forward to Monday morning, and I get out of bed only to realize that I am completely paralyzed from the hips down. It was one of the scariest feelings in the world. I pulled myself, because I could still use my arms, to my phone to call my mom and to tell her that something was really wrong and I think we needed to go to the hospital. When we get to the hospital, the first thing they did was roll me down to have an MRI of my brain and my spinal column. The doctor was thinking that there was possibly a tumor that was pressing on my brain or my spinal column that could have been causing the paralysis. I really wish they would not have told me that, because I basically laid there in that machine for an hour and 15 minutes planning out the rest of my life. It's amazing how your brain just automatically assumes the worst, right? Oh, I've got a tumor, which means I've got cancer, and I've got a short time to live. And so I started thinking, where are my clothes gonna go to? Who's gonna take care of my cat? Who am I gonna give all of this stuff away to? How are my parents gonna deal with the loss of a child when they are just beginning the process of divorce? So much went on in my head in that hour and 15-minute time frame. It was torture. Long story short, the neurologist came into my room that night, sat down on the bed next to me, and he said, all right, Vanessa, I've got good news and I've got bad news. Which one do you want first? I said, well, what's the good news? He said, the good news is you don't have a tumor, you don't have cancer, and you're not gonna die. Fantastic. What's the bad news? The bad news is that you have something called Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's an autoimmune disease where your own immune system begins to attack the nerve cells and renders you paralyzed. It starts in your feet, it ascends all the way up to your neck, and he said by the morning we expect for your lungs to crash, you'll be on a ventilator, you'll be paralyzed from the neck down, but you'll be able to see everybody and hear everybody, but you'll basically be a vegetable. A vegetable. Wow. How long is this paralysis going to last? He said, well, it could last from 3 months to 6 months, all the way up to a year, because it takes time for the nerve cells to regenerate. At this time in my life, I was an NFL cheerleader, and I had just started working with a large pharmaceutical company, both of which I needed my legs for. I literally saw my life as I knew it just shatter and crumble into a million pieces, because wow. So the doctor left my room. My mom was in tears, and I saw the panic in my dad's eyes, although he did hide it very well. And I know he saw the fear and the disbelief in my eyes. And what he did next would change the rest of my life. He leaned over me and he put a hand on each side of the hospital bed on the silver rails, and he looked me dead in the eye and he said, Vanessa, your attitude about this is the best medicine they could ever give you. You could either lay here and say this isn't fair, and why is this happening to me, and why now, but all that's going to do is cause more suffering. He said, if you can find a way to radically accept the situation you're in, because there's nothing you can do to change it, he says, you'll cause a whole lot less suffering for yourself. So I thought about that. How in the heck do I radically accept that in a few hours I am going to be a complete vegetable, and it could be that way for a year? But I really took what he said to heart and thought about it and said, how do I do this? God, how do I do this? And finally it came to me. I said, I'll go through this if somebody else can get their legs back. So I offered it up for someone else, and the most incredible thing happened at that point in time. I had 100% complete peace about what I was about to go through. I didn't like it. I still didn't like it, but I wasn't suffering about it. I had fully and completely, radically accepted what I was about to go through. And that's a feeling that I can't even put into words, but all I can say is that I was at peace with what was about to happen to me. Once I had peace about this, I fell right to sleep. They brought me a Xanax, but I didn't end up taking it because I didn't need it. And I fell right to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I reluctantly opened my eyes. I took my first breath of air, only to realize that not only was I not on a ventilator, but the paralysis had completely stopped. It didn't go any further. When Dr. Adams came into my room, he was beside himself. He didn't understand. He had no explanation. Ironically, he had Guillain-Barré syndrome when he was 17, and he was paralyzed from the neck down for a year. So to see that my conditions hadn't worsened was really shocking for him. Of course, he was happy for me, but he had no explanation. He said that if my condition didn't worsen, that he would go ahead and discharge me the next day. And so that's what happened. My paralysis stopped. It never went any further, and I was sent home the next day. I remained partially crippled for a couple of months and rehabilitated my legs on my own. And every day was a challenge to make it just one step further, but I did it. What I learned from this experience, what this experience taught me, was that whatever happens in our lives happens for us. It doesn't happen to us, the good and the bad. And I have no doubt in my mind that this happened for me so that I could learn the art of radical acceptance. It's the most important life lesson that I have ever learned. You know, the universe will constantly present you with obstacles and challenges along your entire journey of life because they are meant to teach you something. If you miss the lesson the first time around, well, the challenge is going to show up again, probably disguised as something else. Can you think back on your life and recognize this happening in your own life? Are there challenges or obstacles that keep coming up, maybe each one disguised just a little bit differently, but each one has the same lesson instilled in each one? What is it that you're meant to learn? And more importantly, how can you begin to implement what you learn into your life so that you could benefit others? Fortunately, and thanks to my dad, I learned what it meant to radically accept that which I had no control over before the paralysis went any further. I have no doubt in my mind this is what I was meant to learn in this particular obstacle, and once I was able to embrace that, the paralysis stopped. There was no need for it to go any further than it did. Fascinating, right? So the next time you catch yourself saying, it is what it is, or I accept this, or I accept that, ask yourself, am I totally and completely at peace with whatever it is I am proclaiming to accept? If you are, and this will require being fully present and brutally honest with yourself, then you know you have achieved radical acceptance of what is. If you still have any traces of anger or resentment or frustration or dis-ease of any sort about the situation you're in, then you have not yet reached radical acceptance. Now remember, radical acceptance doesn't mean you have to like the situation you are in. It just means you are choosing to not cause any more suffering for yourself. No one that has ever fought against reality, that is to say, what is, has ever won. Day will always turn into night and vice versa, and you can fight that reality all you want, but you won't win because there's nothing that you can do about it. It is what it is. Things always are as they are. So what do you do now? In my health coaching practice, I help people to come to terms and to radically accept situations in their life that they have absolutely no control over, because this is such an important component of total health and wellness. If there's anything in your life right now that you can't change and yet you are resisting it, you're causing suffering for yourself. If you want to talk more about this and find a way to get past this, then please click on the link either above or below this video and schedule a time to talk with me today. Thanks so much for tuning in and for hanging in. It's a longer video than usual, but I appreciate your time, and I will see you next week.